Hello and welcome everyone to the Sharmit podcast. Today I am here with another special guest, Dusty Rivers, who has joined us all the way from United States of America. If I talk about Dusty, then he has played a key role in the IBM Z ecosystem, and it has earned him the prestigious title of Lifetime IBM Champion for Z, which is a recognition of his deep expertise and unwavering commitment to the platform. Not only this, as an lifetime IBM champion, Dusty has dedicated countless hours to sharing his knowledge through speaking engagements, mentoring young professionals, and actively participating in industry forums. So, in this episode, we are going to talk about his professional journey and his contribution to this IT community. But before we start, I would like to thank Dusty for joining us today in this episode. And now I request you to please initiate the discussion by telling us something about yourself.
Thank you for having me this morning. So, yes, I'm Dusty Rivers. I've actually been in the IBM mainframe Z space my entire career. So it sounds a long time, but for me, it doesn't seem that way. It's been over 47 years of my career, and it's constantly changing, it's constantly evolving, and we're going to talk about a lot of those things during this session. But first of all, thanks for having me.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to talk with you and to discuss various things related to this community. And I'm very excited to initiate the discussion. So, can you please share a bit about your professional journey, like how you got involved in this mainframe area, and what was the initial things that sparked your interest into this mainframe world?
Sure. So when I came out of college, like I said, it's been a long time ago.
Yeah.
The mainframe systems are the large systems. We're pretty much the only systems around. So I started first out of college. My specialty in college that I really enjoyed was databases. So
Okay.
when I came out, I worked for a company doing COBOL, working with a database. Then I transitioned into more of working for a large telecom, doing IMS for many years. And then when DB2 became available, I actually transitioned to DB2 and brought DB2 into the company. And I worked there for many years. And about that time, they started getting into distributed systems in the mainframe, communicating with each other. I went into a group there. We started some large scale systems. At one time, we had the largest DB2 system in the world. Now it's probably not that large. But the distributed systems allowed us the opportunity for distributed systems talking to the mainframe, but keeping all the important data on the mainframe, looping it into the systems. And we'll talk about some of those technologies later. But from that, I went, we did a project with an Irish company. I went with the Irish company. We were doing a large distributed system, including the mainframe. From that company to a company where we created APIs. So my initial focus was mainframe, but many of the things that I learned at the university are applicable today, but a lot of the technology has changed. So, we're going to talk about some of those changes, but I stayed here, contrary to what some other people have done, where they come into the mainframe, they go into management, they go do other things. I've always been in the technology and really just adapting as the technology adapted.
Okay. So your journey sounds very interesting and very unique because the way you have explored different areas and you have contributed in many ways to this community, whether it's the mainframe community or the tech IT industry. So now, like, I just want to ask you one thing: like, what does being a lifetime IBM champion for Z mean to you personally and professionally? And how do you feel when you receive this prestigious designation?
So it was an incredible honor. Probably 15 years ago, I was asked about, hey, would you like to be part of the IBM Champion program? And I'll talk about two of the people who brought me into that later. But uh, I thought, well, I spoke at user groups, I spoke at Share, I spoke at conferences, and I was sharing my knowledge. And they said, well, uh, you've been doing this for a while, so I was named a champion. And then in 2020, I believe Meredith Stowell, who was one of the VPs at IBM, log, you know, joined our monthly champions call and said, we're going to make you a lifetime champion for Z. At the time, I was the first one. And it was such an incredible honor. I didn't, I didn't really think, why did I deserve that? But I was so excited. In fact, someone asked me in an interview, who was the first person you told? And I actually told my wife because I
Okay.
was like, you won't believe what they just did. And so it gives me the opportunity to share with other people. You mentioned mentoring. I talk to a lot of universities. I talk to a lot of groups because, I'm kind of on the upper end of my career. So when I do decide one day to step away, I would like the community to be vibrant, to be, like it is right now. It's growing. People are coming to it. And I think with the title of Lifetime Champion, it gives them the opportunity to share my experiences like we're doing here, share my experiences with younger professionals or with professionals who are not even in the space who could say, wow, if it's that exciting, I want to be part of that ecosystem.
All right. So let's talk bit about the mainframe because you have good expertise on this area. So in your opinion, why is the mainframe still a crucial component for corporate infrastructure in today's digital landscape?
A lot of people ask me that. Well, you've been on the mainframe so long, but the mainframe has constantly changed. It's constantly adapted to new technologies. But at the same time, it is still the most powerful machine on the planet. It's still the most secure system on the planet. It's also it's the most dependable. It's up all the time. It really doesn't fail. And now they're adding capabilities of sustainability where it uses less power, it takes up less room. And I think because of all those things, it makes it very hard for customers not to stay on the mainframe because I mean, what else would they go to? I mean, where would they get that much scalability, that much power, that much security of a system that you could, and I think that's why it stays around because it just doesn't fail. And I think, with some of the changes that are coming, it is going to be so, it's so important. When people talk about even hybrid cloud, the mainframe is an integral part of the hybrid cloud solution. It is part of the solution. If you're not using the mainframe in your hybrid cloud environment, you're missing out on a lot of things because it's not, I mean, it used to be considered this machine that sat in the back of the corner. It was hard to get to, it was hard to get information from, and that's just not the case.
Yes. You know what, Dusty, like with this answer, by answering this question, like you have answered all those myths which is around mainframe system, that it is about to die and it is going somewhere. So you have explained in a very decent way that no, it is still playing a vital role in the today's market and today's industry. So thanks for debugging all those myths around the mainframe. Okay, so now I just want to ask one question, like how has the IBM Z ecosystem evolved since you first started working with it, and what advancement are there which excites you for the as the most?
I think as I mentioned a few minutes ago, the mainframe used to be that closed off system that you set in the corner, and the only interface into it was a 3270 screen, and it was a green screen. It was hard to get information. And then I hear people saying it's very difficult to get information. And I think the way it's evolved to me is with the advent of being able to use things like APIs that we'll talk about later, the mainframe just looks like any other API. You can get to data on the mainframe from any tool anywhere, leaving the data where it is, and it's secure. And then also one of the things that was a big knock against the mainframe earlier was, well, you can't run open source on the mainframe. Well, yeah, you can, because there's a lot of companies that are bringing over open source solutions. Young professionals like yourself, you may be used to using a specific language like Go or things on your distributed system, and it works the same. So, we tried an experiment at one of the conferences where we set a group of young people in front of like a VS Code terminal and said, write a Go program. And they did. And they said, what is the big deal of what I just did? And it's like, you just wrote a Go program, deployed it and ran it on an IBM mainframe. And they were like, really? And I think that's the excitement is the kind of the embracing of new technology, of new ways of doing business, but not throwing out the old. I know a friend of mine with IBM talks about at my age, I can use ISPF faster than anyone else, probably because I've been doing it. But for a young person, if they're using their particular interface, they can do that. We're not saying use one or the other. Use what you're most comfortable with. And I think that's where the ecosystem is changing and evolving, is allowing newer professionals using different tooling, using different methods of doing things and methodologies to develop and become productive very fast. And I think that's what the exciting thing is. And I think one of the things that I'm seeing, the advent of the open source, the new technologies, and I'd say two of the exciting things that they're going to be talking a lot about: artificial intelligence, the AI chip, the Telum chip, the availability of AI. That's going to change because that can run on the mainframe, and it can be secure, it can be scalable. Also, when we're talking about the whole cybersecurity, your data is safe there, but as cybersecurity rolls out, and we're talking about quantum safe systems, I think that's what exciting to me is it's constantly a changing and evolving landscape.
Yes, right. Okay, so another question is related to your expertise again, that you have worked extensively on the integrating mainframe system with distributed application. So can you please elaborate on some of the challenges as well as successes you have experienced and witnessed in this particular area?
Yeah, and I think early on in this area, it was the fear of getting the mainframe, or the misnomer or the myth of you can't get information off the mainframe. So that was some of the challenges. But then as we moved on, like I said, I work with large companies, a large airline company, a large bank, and what they wanted to do is they had such a rich environment of code, information on the mainframe. And all they wanted to do was present that information to new systems. And early on, it was, well, how do I do that? I don't want to write a program. I don't want to move the data. And so the challenges were sitting down, figuring out how to do it the easiest way. In other words, what is the most expedient way to do it? And I think, one customer that we work with, we actually went from a proof of concept of designing APIs to full production in 2 months.
Okay.
And the idea was we had to identify the initial challenge is finding out what business logic you want to expose. What business functionality am I trying to expose to the distributed world? And also, then you have to take a step back and say, I have to do that securely. So, you're not violating any of the security on the mainframe. The fact that many people get upset when you talk about opening data up from the mainframe is, wow, you're just going to open the data up to everyone. No, it's going to be opened up through APIs. It's going to be opened up through access, but it's going to be done under the reins of the existing security. So you're not going to be exposing valuable company assets to an unsecured world. So I think we've seen a lot of success. As I mentioned, the airline we work with are doing billions of APIs a year now. There's
Okay.
systems in the background. We have financial institutions that are doing real-time integration right now. And the surprising thing is it goes both ways. We have distributed systems calling into the mainframe, but at the same time, we were able to go the other way, having mainframe programs calling out real time to distributed systems. We have a customer, and they needed information from an SAP system. So real time from their IMS transaction, they make a real time call out to SAP to get information and come back. So not only is the mainframe acting as a client, it's acting as a server in real time processing in a secure and performant manner.
Okay. And here, Dusty, I want to ask one question specifically for those person like who just wanted to start their career in this mainframe world. So, what piece of advice would you like to give those? Let's say if someone is there who wanted to initiate their career in the mainframe. So, where they can start from? Like, is there any specific things that they are supposed to do in order to adopt the mainframe in a very easier way?
Yeah, so there's a lot of things. I know that in part of my I guess my portfolio when I talk to college students or new professionals is there are programs, and there's a program from IBM called Z Explorer. You can just go out there on your
Yeah.
own time, go through mainframe training, learning about things. There are companies like Broadcom have like a vitality program. If you're new to the mainframe, I would also say get involved
Okay.
with user groups. I mean, like I'm on the board of directors for Share. For Share, if you're a student or you're new to Z, you can join Share. You have access to, for free, You have access to some of the learning, some of the presentations. But I would say get involved. I mean, there's a lot of you're going to see a lot of thing on LinkedIn. Also, I would say the one thing I tell new students and new to Z is the most important thing you have to sell is yourself.
Yes.
So start, start building your brand. Create a LinkedIn profile. Uh, Link to people that you might think are interesting, or if you see if you see someone doing a presentation, link to them on LinkedIn. Ask them questions. There are many of us, we'd love to be mentors to people. We can point you in directions. I have people send me notes that say, I'm looking for a job. Do you know someone who's looking for? Well, I may not have that position, but I may know someone who is. So the important thing is get connected, uh, create a profile for yourself on LinkedIn, and start to put things on LinkedIn about what you like to do, where you would like to work, what you'd like to do. So, there again, and there's two different kinds of what I call new to Z people.
Mm-hmm.
There are people coming from the universities that are learning computing that want to go into the mainframe space once they realize it is a vibrant and exciting space.
Yeah.
The second type is maybe people who are in other careers that want to transition to a mainframe space. So, there's a program at IBM and Broadcom called New to Z. There are programs being held at Share and some of the conferences. And, at Tech Exchange, there's going to be a New to Z track where if you're thinking this is something you might want to do, you can actually experience going through some of the sessions, kind of introductory session. But, reach out to people in the community. There's a lot of people who would love just to sit down and have a chat with you like we're doing now.
Yes. And I completely agree with you that yes, everyone, especially those who just started their career, should build a community over the LinkedIn or maybe any other platform they in which they are comfortable, because this is the only way to connect with all those like-minded people, because there are many people who really wanted to help other members to grow in their life, right? So yeah, this is just one way to not only learn but to also collaborate with other member to find out a solution of or to really develop the innovative things for the community. So that's the great tip you have shared just with those who just wanted to make their career. So yeah, that's a really appreciable things. And now like let's talk bit about the APIs, because you have utilized APIs on a very broader way. So how has the shift towards RESTful APIs changed the way mainframe are included in distributed architectures compared to older technologies like SOAP or maybe the Cobra? So
So initially, I think when the interfaces came out, it was just trying to figure out how to get one side to talk to the other. So with the Corba technology, it was based on creating an interface first called an IDL, and then you created this client and server. And it was pretty heavy. You could do the APIs and they worked very fast, but at some point, the payload and the creation of those APIs for some people were a little cumbersome. And then it kind of morphed into like XML and SOAP. And SOAP had an interface called WSDL, and it said, here's the input, here's the output. But it also talked a lot about the data types and other things, and the messaging and the creation of those. Sometimes the SOAP architecture was a little heavy for what you wanted to do. Then what happened is they went to the more RESTful, which is a lighter weight, they're smaller interfaces. And I think most people started looking and saying, look, I can implement these RESTful APIs. And really when the distributed systems morphed into cell phones and tablets and iPads and things like that, the interface from those devices needed to be quick. It needed to be very mobile. It needed to be short. And the RESTful APIs provided that method. It's very quick to create one. The APIs are very, they're very, I don't know, say small, because you can have some large ones, but they're very lightweight. And I think because, the industry across all APIs is kind of streamlined now. It's like, okay, the RESTful APIs or the RESTful architecture, if you will, is a little lighter weight. It's easier to create. So most companies and most technologies are now using REST because as everything, it changes to be more performant, more streamlined, and more easy, if you will. And I think that's why I see things like I noticed that some of the new AI, we have a RESTful interface because everyone is used to using RESTful APIs.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, as per your opinion, Dusty, like with the rise of microservices, what are the best practices for meaningful for managing APIs that connects the distributed system with the mainframe backends?
I think basically doing a lot of planning. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we work with customers and they create a really quick microservice that does one thing, and then they create a microservice that does another thing, and then they realize that the third person may need both of those microservices to do something. So do they execute one and two, or do they create another one that kind of encompasses both of them? So I think planning up front and managing them, and then you kind of need a place to put them. Kind of a centralized repository or an API manager or a catalog where someone can look up because I've worked with large organizations where you have three groups and they're all developing APIs. And then they come together and they realize two of the groups actually created the same API, but maybe with one thing different because they didn't communicate. So I think when you have a centralized API repository where you can register them and look at them, users can look them up and say, yes, I need that one. Also, sometimes, I talk about death by microservices. If you've got 12,000 microservices, how many, it's going to be very difficult. So the planning and kind of the management of having a central place to say, okay, Dusty created this API and it provides name, address, phone number, and account number.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe you only need a API that does name, address, and phone number. So if rather than create a second one, maybe you just use the one that I created and don't even look at those, don't even use those. So it's kind of, I hate to say it's planning, but it is. It's kind of like if you realize you've got 10,000 APIs and people are only using 1,000, it may be because the planning. And I think when we worked with like the airline, is there was a central group that said, we need to create an API that does X. And someone would say, wait a minute, there's an API that already does most of that. So I
Yeah.
think the API management, the API, there being a way to register them and put them in a management structure is very important, or you're going to have 12,000 microservices and someone's only using 10%.
Okay. All right. So now let's talk bit about your professional journey in a deeper way. So you have worked with companies across the globe, including the US, Germany, Brazil, right? So are
Yes.
there any notable differences in your in how organization approach mainframe integration in different regions?
From what I have seen is many of the mainframe companies in the United States or the US are very large.
Hmm.
And sometimes being so large, it takes them a while to get things done. I work with companies in France and Germany where the organization is much smaller and more compact. And so the decision maker or the decision makers, in other words, they don't have to call someone in California and New York and Louisiana to get them all on a phone call. Most people are localized in the local geo. I mean, larger companies are, but I think also in some of those cases, the regulations are different. Like, for instance, in some of the European companies, the geolocation of the data, you can't have data if you're in Germany, the data from Germany can't really go to France or can't go to the Netherlands. It has to stay in the geographic locations. So I think sometimes the smaller companies are more agile because
Hmm.
they can get stuff done quicker. And in some cases, they are being driven by, like in France and part of, the GDPR, some of the government regulations, like in the Swiss bank, the companies have to react quick because the local governments are imposing regulations. And in some cases, they're used to reacting quicker because,
Okay.
you know, they're smaller and the government are saying, hey, you have to do this. And oh, by the way, you have to do this like in 6 months. Where if you tried to implement some of that in the United States, it's got, there's regulations, there's state law, there's county law, there's city law, there's federal law. And, sometimes it gets mired down and just the companies are so big and there's so many departments. So I think in many parts of the world outside the United States, some of those companies can react much quicker.
Okay. So there is one question for you, which is a reflection question. So if you could go back and give one piece of advice to your younger self when you first started working with IBM Z, so what would it be?
I was asked that someone else, and I had to think about it for a second. And I think if I could go back, um, I think I would tell myself, take more chances.
Okay.
Because when I was early, I was just doing database and I wasn't looking at it anything else. And there was other groups that said, "Hey, do you want to come work on this?" I'm like, "No, no, no, I like database." And then it was like, "Well, what do you want?" And I think it would be to go back and say, take a breath, look around you, and also do a little, do a little bit more. Social media has gotten so big now that when I was younger, there was not the social media, but
Yeah.
look at the trends. Now you can say, like, I had someone, if I could go back and tell myself, well, also if I could go back and tell myself, hey, buy this stock called Apple, that would have been great. But also, I think it would be just take chances and look at new things and embrace change.
Thank you. Because this is not the answer, but this is a guidance for those who are going to start their career. So that's a great answer. And one more thing here I want to ask, like in the year of 2024, if someone wants to start learning the API from scratch, let's say if someone is not aware of anything about API, so what would be the right procedure to start with a API? Like, is there any specific thing which you would like to suggest here?
I mean, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of research out there. There's, if you
Mhm.
just Google APIs, mainframe APIs, there's a lot of research on the web. And if you see a particular author, there's probably some stuff out there that I've done. Reach out to that person. Again,
Okay.
back to where I said when I said sell yourself, is branch out. Reach out to someone on LinkedIn, reach out to someone and say, "Hey, I saw you wrote this article." Or if you're able to go to any of the conferences like Share or Tech Exchange or any of those worldwide or GSE, those experts are going to be there. You could, there are many that are reaching out. Go talk to them. Go ask questions.
Okay. All right. Okay, so Dusty, like we have many things that we can discuss because you have explored various things, but just because of the limitation of time, I would like to ask my last question.
Okay.
So, like we all know that you are playing a vital role as a mentor and an influential person for many of us. But I want to ask one thing here, like who have been some of your biggest mentors or influencer throughout your career, like and how they have shaped you for your work with IBM Z?
So my first two, and I was joking, is I actually got to go back is my initial professor and my
Okay.
initial director, Danny Carter and Dr. Ralph Bislin, who I saw last year and were able, is when I went to university, they were the ones who taught me to communicate. They were the ones who taught me to think, how to do analysis, which carried me through. And then when I got into the technology, but I talked about people who pushed me. Well, Ann Sheridan with IBM and Beverly Tyrell with IBM said, "Look, you're doing so much in IMS and talking. Why don't you be a champion?" So they pushed me into the champion program. And then a really good friend of mine, who I've known for over 40 years, Steve Nathan, has been working on IMS for almost 50 years. And when I was younger, just learning it, I was working for a Bell system. I would go to what was called Bell Laboratories. He was one of the instructors. And just his way of thinking and analyzing things kind of, we still stay in touch today, but those are people who kind of help you or someone you can pick up the phone and call. And there's a lot of people today. I joke about with with Shari and Libby at the Champions program. They will always ask me, "Can you do this?" And I always say yes because nobody can say no to them. So, you know, it's there are people that just kind of keep jumping in and out of your lives, but I would say all of those people are people that I look at that I can still go back to, and I can still go back and talk to my original college professor, and I do when I go back there. So I think those are the ones who kind of mentored me to get into where I am today. And of course, my I would have to say the one, there's one person, my wife of 47 years, she's the one who I'm kind of I have to live up to her measuring stick of what I'm supposed to be. And so, I also value her input.
Yeah. Okay, that's a great thing. And before we just conclude the podcast, is there any specific hobbies that you pursue outside of your professional thing? Because you are managing various things, technically wise, right? So, is there anything, any specific hobby that you pursue to stay motivated and to manage your life work balance?
Yes, so I used to, I haven't done a lot. I used to refinish antique furniture. So I used to do a lot of that. But the one thing is with I have 8 grandchildren. So my hobbies are going to their sporting events, following them, going to them. But also one of the things that I usually talk about is cooking. I love to cook. And
Okay.
so in fact, I did a podcast that we started talking about technology and then we went off into recipes. So cooking is a really big hobby too.
So you are a multi-talented guy. You are not only doing those technical things, but you are other things also.
Right.
That's really great. So thank you once again, Dusty, for taking out time and for joining this podcast. I hope you also enjoyed the discussion. So thank you once again.
Thank you.